At first glance, Uma Musume Pretty Derby looks like the ultimate gacha game cash grab. It's the kind of franchise you'd struggle to explain in polite company without sounding utterly insane. But behind all the horse ears tales and idol songs lies something else entirely, something genuinely profound that manages to hit with the full weight of history's most world-shaking words ever spoken, all hidden behind this. Because here's the shocking truth. Uma Musume and all its horse girls might actually be one of the most life-changingly, world-changingly deep works of art I have ever seen. But of course, the question is, how the fuck? Part 1, Uma Absurdity. Uma Musume isn't just about cute anime girls running around a track, though it definitely is that. If you've either watched the anime or been a diligent enough trainer and not skipped every cutscene in the game, it's easy to see just how much effort has gone into taking real-life stories of real racehorses and crafting them into an anime and game that's surprisingly addictive. It's harder, however, especially if you've only ever played the game, to see just how evocative, heart-wrenching, and somewhat ironically, deeply human Uma Musume actually is. In the face of its contrived premise, I think Uma Musume is a genuinely serious series that manages to parallel within its stories some of the most out-of-pocket life lessons that I never expected to find in such an odd place. Somewhere around the halfway point of the second season, I slowly started to notice how the different stories and themes throughout Uma Musume actually mirrored those of my favorite speeches of all time. Speeches that literally reshaped the course of my life more than once. Now I know that might sound like one hell of a stretch, but let me give you an example of what I mean before getting into the real meat of it. As with the uprise in popularity of the game, so too has one character in particular captured the hearts of fans more than any other. Haru Urara, the pink-haired bundle of pure joy who, at first glance, doesn't really have all that much going for her. So why do so many people, including myself who took her all the way to the URA final, love her so much? She's a 1-star in the game, barely gets any screen time in the anime, and doesn't have some badass legacy. Having retired after a record-breaking 0 wins and 113 losses, Haru Urara quickly earned the title of the horse that ran just to run, because she couldn't win. Yet somehow, despite all of that, we all seem to fall in love with the little horsey that couldn't. The question is, why? Other than her just being adorable. Here's what I think. Haru's story is actually one of triumph, just not in the traditional sense. There's something about her fortitude to show up again and again and choose to run despite always losing that reminds us that failure isn't our defining factor. See, what makes Haru such a lovable character is that she's not defined by her losses, but her choice to keep running in spite of them, which is where Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech comes in. In his speech, Roosevelt explains that victory is found in the act of striving itself, in the courage to risk, to fail, and then to rise again, no matter the outcome. Whether man or horse, the one who dares to step into the arena in the face of failure will always stand taller than those who never dared to pursue the heights in the first place. In short, the same reason we love this random Japanese racehorse that most of us never heard of until this summer is due to the same themes that caused Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech to go down in history as one of the most rousing to the heart speeches ever made. But you probably need more convincing than that to believe Roosevelt's words echo through the entirety of Uma Musume, don't you? So let's try to break it down further with a far deeper example and see just how interconnected this speech truly is with the themes and depth of Uma Musume. Also, spoiler warning, from here on out, I'll be diving into the entire Uma Musume series. That said, I don't think it's really a story you can spoil in the traditional sense, as Uma Musume is much more about the journey, the race itself. So, in my opinion, no amount of breakdown could truly replicate the heartbeat of actually experiencing it for yourself. But still, if you want to go in completely blind, now is your chance to head out. Though, please come back afterwards. Part 2, Theodore Roosevelt. As an American, I believe it's my patriotic duty to have a favorite president. And in my not so humble opinion, the greatest president we've ever had was none other than the bully old Theodore Roosevelt. If you didn't know, Roosevelt was a certified badass. He got shot before a campaign speech and instead of panicking, kept talking for 90 minutes, explored an uncharted river in the Amazon to cope with losing a presidential run, and overcame life-threatening asthma via muscular Christianity. Yes, that's a real thing. Look it up. Roosevelt was a man who treated life like one high-stakes adventure, and during that adventure faced many setbacks and failures that defined his outlook on life. But as this is an anime video, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, I shall get to the point already. In 1910, Roosevelt delivered a speech in Paris that contained one of the most unforgettable passages ever spoken. It came to be known as the man in the arena. But before I read it, a quick note. Roosevelt will constantly refer to man and he, but make no mistake, he meant mankind. Roosevelt was surprisingly ahead of his time on women's rights, even being a large advocate of women in politics, which was basically unheard of in the 1910s. So when you hear man, think humanity, or I guess maybe horsemanity? It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. By the end of the second season of Uma Musume, I couldn't help but notice what I believe to be the perfect mirror for this speech. Tokai Teo, who is actually the specific reason I decided to make this video. Because Teo's story in Uma Musume is one of stumbling. Not once, but over and over. At first, she's a kind of golden girl, the undeniably remarkable horse destined for greatness. Her dream is the Triple Crown, the highest symbol of racing victory, and in her personal view, the torch of a new era she so desperately wants to carry so she can continue the legacy of the person she looks up to most. And with her overwhelming talent, it feels less like a dream and more like an inevitability. She runs with the conviction of someone chasing history. But inevitability isn't. One injury, one simple twist of fate, completely out of her control, and suddenly everything falls apart. Unable to participate in the Kikuka show, the Triple Crown slips away, taking with it the very meaning of everything she had poured her very life and soul into. It's the complete and utter shattering of her very being. For someone whose whole identity was built on the destiny of reaching these heights, the loss is complete and total devastation. But she rises up and chooses to rewrite her story. If she can't be the Triple Crown champion, maybe she can still maintain her undefeated title. Maybe she can carve her history into a different shape and still prove that her skills cannot be overlooked. But then, as if fate wishes to deny her of legend, another injury. Each stumble weighing on her heavier than the last, because each one breaks not only her body, but the future she thought was waiting for her. She's forced to lower her sights again and again, forced to trade her original dream for smaller and smaller ones, until eventually there seems to be nothing left to reach for. No clear horizon to give her sacrifices and effort meaning. The commitment of tears and all the hours she spent seeming to deliver nothing more than meaningless pain and suffering. Even her compromise of a dream, her backup vision of glory, lies in total ruin. And yet, this is where Roosevelt's words become almost prophetic. There is no effort without error and shortcoming. Theo's body carries the scars of every defeat and every shortcoming. But what makes her so extraordinary is that she keeps daring to return, even when the world, and sometimes even she herself, knows how hopeless it looks. By the end, her dream shifts one final time. No longer the Triple Crown, no longer being undefeated, but just to be the best she can with whatever she has left. While I think on the surface it may sound like settling for less, in truth, it's so much greater, because as Roosevelt said, the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. While Theo's glory can no longer lie in being untouchable, her legacy is forged in the fact that she refuses to stay down, rising with a weary, broken body and even more fragile spirit, and no matter what, choosing to step back onto the track. Looking even further into it, Roosevelt speaks of the great devotions, of pouring yourself fully into a worthy cause, and I believe that's exactly what Theo does. Her dreams kept breaking, but instead of stepping back, she poured every ounce of herself into the track as an act of devotion, not just to her love for racing, but seemingly to her newfound understanding that resilience is her new identity. She no longer runs to be perfect, she runs to prove a truth deeper than victory. That even when fate tears away every dream you built your identity on, you can still rise and choose courage over surrender. And that choice alone is sometimes enough. That is the essence of Roosevelt's worthy cause. Daring to live fully, knowing failure will eventually come, but deciding to meet it head on anyways. That's why Theo's final race is so powerful. She steps into it with no guarantees, no grandiose goal, only the knowledge that she may fail yet again. But, as Roosevelt says, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. Theo runs for the sheer audacity of daring once again towards the heights. But that act of stepping back into the arena, of getting into that starting gate, of daring greatly, transforms her moment entirely. Win or lose, the act of running the race itself becomes her victory, because in spite of everything she's been through, choosing to run is exactly what proves her greatness. In many ways, I firmly believe that Theo is the perfect mirror of Roosevelt's philosophy. True greatness doesn't belong to those who live untouched by failure, but to those who choose to embrace the darkest moments of life, knowing yet another failure may be looming over the horizon, yet still daring to pursue greater, to pursue what they believe to be a worthy cause. I think that's why her story resonated with me so deeply, and hopefully you too, because in our own lives, most of us will never be undefeated or promised greatness. There truly is no way for us to live perfectly. We all stumble and lose sight of things we thought were certain. But Tokai Theo, the anime horse girl, of all things, shows us, just as Roosevelt did, that the measure of our lives is in whether we have the courage to not only take the step into the arena, but to choose to, once we inevitably fail, get back up, dust ourselves off, and rise again. Throughout life, I've constantly been reminded that, much like Theo, none of us are promised the Triple Crown. But what we are always promised is the chance to get back into the arena, to keep trying. So yeah, Theodore Roosevelt, the greatest president in American history, and Tokai Theo, an anime horse girl, taught me the exact same lessons. And honestly, I kind of needed that reminder more than I'd like to admit. Roosevelt's words had greatly altered the course of my life once before, but somewhere along the way, I lost them. And it took Uma Musume, of all things, to bring them back to the forefront of my life. If I'm being real, I've spent a lot of my life feeling like I'm behind everyone else, like I'm stumbling through failure after failure, never really finding my footing. It's hard to remember the last time I achieved something I'd honestly call a true success. That said, there is one dream that never stopped clawing its way back into my life. This. But hell, it's been kind of brutal. Every upload feels a little more pointless than the last, and I spend hours scripting and editing to get nowhere. Honestly, between every single video, I wrestle with the question of whether or not I should quit. But something about watching Tokai Teo's story, seeing her dream shattered again and again, yet still choosing to climb back into the arena, brought Roosevelt's words crashing back into my life. Every time Teo was knocked down, she had every reason to quit. No one would have blamed her. She could have chosen the safe road and retired. She could have protected herself from more heartbreak, but she didn't. She chose to get back into the arena because chasing that dream, even in the face of failure, was more meaningful than living never having strived to reach further heights. And because of Teo, I remembered what I had lost from Roosevelt, that it's better to be the one in the arena, struggling, stumbling, and failing, but striving towards the thing that matters most than to stand on the sidelines, safe but without meaning. And if you need it, I truly hope you can come to that conclusion as well. It's interesting to me to think that while Roosevelt may have spoken to the people of his time, Uma Musume, in its own bizarre anime horse idol way, is speaking the same words to ours. Or at least those of us crazy enough to watch Uma Musume. But at this point, I want to take a second to step back. We already walked through how Theodore Roosevelt's words somehow managed to mirror Teo's story, and now I really can't help but wonder if I actually took the same speech itself and rewrote it through the lens of Uma Musume, hear me out, would it come across as completely ridiculous, or would it actually feel kind of fitting? Honestly, I am not sure. Maybe both. But I think, as weird as it may sound, it's worth trying. So let me quickly rewrite and potentially bastardize this beautiful speech. And I suppose let me know in the comments if this is solely ridiculous or perhaps hits surprisingly hard. So, with apologies to Teddy himself, allow me to present the Uma in the arena. It's not the announcer who counts, nor the reporter who points out how the favored horse stumbles, nor where the runner of races could have ran with a cleaner stride. The credit belongs to the Uma who steps into the starting gate, whose uniform is marred by dirt and sweat and rain, who falters, who late starts, who comes the neck short again and again. Because there is no race without challenge and no true legacy without setback. But who does actually strive to run the races? Who attempts to carry the great legacies of those who came before, the great commitments to her team and her fans? Who spends herself in the pursuit of legend? Who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of victory? And who, at the worst, if she fails, at least fails surrounded by daring rivals, so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid Umas who refuse to enter the gate, who will never earn the heartbreak of defeat nor the glory of running with everything they had. So what do you think? Did that strangely fit into the world of Uma Musume, or was it just one of the stupidest things I've ever done? Personally, I think it worked pretty well, and I think that's just further testament that this series really does mirror some of these life-changing themes in the most unexpected ways. But I'd like to pose a question that you have likely already thought. Why should we care? Why does it matter that a presidential speech and an anime about horse girls overlap at all? Well, while it might sound silly to compare something as grandiose as a historic speech to a horse girl anime, I believe that drawing these connections reminds us that stories, whether told in a presidential speech or in an anime about horse idols, can carry truths that are universal. The language changes, the settings change, and the characters get a lot more horse-themed, but the heart of the message stays the same. I think anime has a special way of reframing these ideas in a lighter, more approachable package. It takes lessons that might feel intimidating, dense, or too heavy in the original form, and wraps them in humor, charm, and sometimes even absurdity without losing the weight of the message itself. It's like sneaking vegetables into a child's meal without them noticing. The anime lowers your guard, you laugh, you relax, then you suddenly realize you've been hit with something genuinely profound, possibly even life-changing. I find that we live in a media landscape where anime is so often dismissed as weird Japanese cartoons, and Uma Musume is evidently at the brunt of that charge. But it makes me kind of sad to see the medium I love so much overlooked. Yet it's connections like this that are proof that anime, as a form of storytelling, is much more than some overseas nonsense. It can take the same themes that have moved millions and reframe them in a new and unique way that speaks louder than the critics can. In some way, it demonstrates that anime is able to both mirror and compete with more traditional forms of media. I also think that a story like Uma Musume only really works in anime. Sure, you could make a live-action horse racing film about the same topic, but I doubt it would have the same ability to resonate with and relate to the individuals consuming the content. Anime has a way of suspending disbelief just enough to make a world like Uma Musume feel embraceable, and sometimes even relatable, forcing us to care about the struggles and triumphs of its characters in a more personal manner than we would have had they just been represented as horses. And genuinely, the way such an absurd idea can so deeply move us, inspire us, and stay with us is, in my opinion, beautiful. When an anime about idol horse girls can make you feel the exact same thing Roosevelt was talking about over 100 years ago, it's hard to dismiss as just cartoons. But Roosevelt's message is only a fraction of the depth Uma Musume contains. See, this challenge to live as the man in the arena raises some serious unanswered questions. How and why do you actually live as the man in the arena? Or again, horse in the arena? It's one thing to be inspired by Roosevelt's words. It's another thing entirely to live them out day after day, when the failures start to consume you and the arena doesn't let you live unscarred. Roosevelt tells us to keep fighting, but doesn't exactly lend us the mentality we need to embrace or deal with our failures. So to be truly life-changing, world-changing, Uma Musume needs to not only motivate and emotionally move us, but also give us something that demonstrates lessons to live out those motivations. That's where Admiral William H. McRaven's Make Your Bed speech comes into play. Did you forget I opened this having mentioned 2 speeches? William McRaven is a retired 4-star U.S. Navy SEAL Admiral, best known for overseeing the operation that took down Osama bin Laden. Wild pull for an anime video, right? In other words, when he talks about resilience and discipline, he's speaking from a lifetime of experience. And in 2014, McRaven gave an iconic speech to the graduating class at the University of Texas. But unlike Roosevelt, whose words move the heart, McRaven's lessons show us the practical steps to live courageously, to face hardship, and to embody in ourselves what it means to become the man in the arena. While it might sound even more absurd than the Roosevelt connection, I genuinely believe that Uma Musume not only bears the same themes from this Navy SEAL's speech, but that if we actually choose to listen to what this beautiful story has to say, we can definitively come out the end with the capability to not only change our own lives, but to change the world. Even if it starts with something as absurd as a horse girl anime. So let's take a look at how Uma Musume mirrors another one of the most impactful, soul-stirring speeches ever spoken, and how Uma Musume, of all things, can change the world. Part 3, Admiral McRaven. To start, if you want the full original version of this speech, I've linked it below as I'm forced to cover only about half the main points in an effort not to make this video a couple hours long. Also, unlike McRaven himself, I don't exactly have the gravitas of a Navy SEAL, so it might be a little bit more impactful to hear it from him. But never mind that, because he doesn't talk about Uma Musume. Lesson 1. During SEAL training, the students are broken down into boat crews. Each crew is 7 students, 3 on each side of a small rubber boat, and 1 coxswain to help guide the dinghy. Every day, your boat crew forms up on the beach and is instructed to get through the surf zone and paddle several miles down the coast. In the winter, the surf off San Diego can be 8 to 10 feet high, and it is exceedingly difficult to paddle through the plunging surf unless everyone digs in. Every paddle must be synchronized to the stroke count of the coxswain. Everyone must exert equal effort, or the boat will turn against the wave and be unceremoniously tossed back onto the beach. For the boat to make it to its destination, everyone must paddle. You can't change the world alone. You will need some help, and to truly get from your starting point to your destination takes friends, colleagues, the goodwill of strangers, and a strong coxswain to guide them. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. In Uma Musume, every stride on the track also largely depends on those paddling alongside you, or more so, running alongside the Umas. When you first look at Uma racing, it seems to be a solo endeavor, but taking a step back and looking at the greater picture, we can clearly see that the difference between winning and losing is more in the experiences off the track than on the track. Experiences of shared struggle, overcomings, and encouragement found in the bonds these Umas share are often the moments that give those same Umas the strength and composure needed to be victorious during the parts of the race where their legs alone might not carry them far enough. I think this is most obvious in Season 3. When you look at the Kitasan Black and Satono Diamond story arc, you can see how their bond brings McRaven's words into practice. Kitasan's fire is only able to burn brightest because Diamond is always there, rowing with her, at times acting as a rival, pushing her forward, and others acting as a friend to help steady the rhythm of the rowing when the waves are crashing the hardest. When Kita falters, it's her childhood friend and constant rival Diamond who steadies her stride with the guidance she needed to navigate through her rough waters. In turn, when Diamond is the one who falters, it's Kita who pushes her forward, enabling her to avoid a flipped boat. And when Kita begins to face the painful reality of losing her prime, it's the combination of Diamond, Team Spica, her local community, and Nature Sensei who remind her that victory can be found in the joy she inspires in those who watch her. Even in the kinda meme that is Nature Sensei and Kita's relationship, it's obvious to see that when Kita is struggling, she can indeed always seek help from and eventually find a guiding light in Nature Sensei, despite the only thing Nature really being able to provide her is a shoulder to lean on. And if we look at the series as a whole, it's easy to find almost countless examples of personal bonds that enable these girls to reach for greater heights than they otherwise would have were they on their own. Even the game drives the same point home. Every career, there's always a rival to measure yourself against. You and I are the trainers to act as the coxswain of the boat, and friendship training can really be the difference between winning and failing the URA final. Even through the game, the message is clear. I think no matter how much talent any of us has, no one makes it through the rough waves of life alone. At least not very easily. Very few legacies are truly defined by one person alone, and the people we surround ourselves with can often make a massive difference in the direction of our lives. It can be hard, especially if you too are a bit of a loner like me, to accept that life isn't exactly made to be endured alone. But if we make an effort to surround ourselves with the proper boat crew, we will both have help and be able to give help when the roughest waves attempt to flip us over. So, if you want to change the world, find someone to help you run. Lesson 2. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 35. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys. The Munchkin crew, we called them, where no one was over 5'5". The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed. Not your color, not your ethnic background, not your education, and not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not the size of their flippers. One thing that we have all experienced more than once is being estimated via how we look, where we're from, or perhaps what our interests are. It's an unfair truth that people often won't make an effort to see past the veil of what makes us, us. One of the most obvious real-life examples, for me personally, has been my love for anime. And maybe you can relate to this, but I've been looked down on for liking cringy cartoons because people don't really understand what anime can be and often look at it with distasteful eyes. I've even been judged for making this exact video when I talked about the concept with other people, not caring to look any further into my words, only seeing how some dumbass made an hour-long Uma Musume video. Which is kind of fair, I guess. But if we want to carry ourselves and those around us into a better world, then we need to ensure not to judge others by anything other than their heart. Heart being a combination of what an individual desires and how they act to achieve those desires. In my eyes, no Uma embodies this better than Oguri Cap. I was honestly really enthralled by her country weirdo to icon and legend story arc in Cinderella Grey. It struck some sort of chord within me and made every race and story beat that little bit more engaging. I mean, who doesn't love an underdog story? But just like many of us, Oguri Cap was constantly judged at face value. Unlike many of her rivals, Oguri wasn't born into a legendary racing bloodline, nor did she, or does she really, carry the aura of a prestigious pedigree. As such, it took a long time before people started to look at her as anything more than some country blumpkin. In the beginning, she was no more than a nobody from the countryside, and due to that, many people questioned whether she could ever stand on the grand stage. Few actually saw her capabilities, and even fewer saw just how much effort she was putting in. The dirtied uniform she would arrive at class in caused judgment, when in reality it was a sign of just how tough and long her training sessions were. Many people only saw her disheveled appearance and neglected to try and get a look at what was in her heart. Few ever saw the effort she poured into her daily training, not recognizing just how much more important that training was to her than something as unimportant to her aspirations as her appearance. Yet, race after race, she showed her grit, literally gouging her hoofprints of history into the track, each victory proving that what really matters isn't where you come from, what you look like, or what people think of you, but what goals you wish to attain, and how deeply you're willing to push yourself to attain them. If you want to change the world, measure someone by the size of their heart, not by the size of their horseshoes. Lesson 3. Several times a week, the instructors would line up the class and do a uniform inspection. It was exceptionally thorough. Your hat had to be perfectly starched, your uniform immaculately pressed, and your belt buckle shiny and void of any smudges. But it seemed that no matter how much effort you put into starching your hat, pressing your uniform, or polishing your belt buckle, it just wasn't good enough. The instructors would find something wrong. For failing uniform inspection, the student had to run, fully clothed, into the surf zone, and then, wet from head to toe, roll around on the beach until every part of your body was covered with sand. The effect was known as sugar cookie. You stayed in that uniform the rest of the day, cold, wet, and sandy. There were many a student that just couldn't accept the fact that all their effort was in vain, that no matter how hard they tried to get the uniform right, it went unappreciated. Those students didn't make it through training. Those students didn't understand the purpose of the drill. You were never going to succeed. You were never going to have a perfect uniform. The instructors weren't going to allow it. Sometimes, no matter how well you prepare or how well you perform, you still end up as a sugar cookie. It's just the way life is sometimes. If you want to change the world, get over being a sugar cookie and keep moving forward. Have you ever had a moment when you not only feel like you did, but may actually have done everything right, yet still got kicked down by life, and all you could do was keep on keeping on? Now, I clearly can't hear your responses, but I've personally had countless points in my life where it's felt like I've given something my all, everything I possibly had, yet still failed. Which, let's be honest, dear viewer, is probably going to be the story of this disturbingly long Uma Musume video. Which reminds me, if this video has been interesting, don't look a gift horse in the mouth and consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and checking out the Patreon. Because if you'd like to see more content like this, literally any amount of engagement massively helps. But looping back, my point is that this is yet another experience that I believe most people will encounter. The feeling of doing everything, but getting nothing. And I think when it comes to Uma Musume, the show never really pulls these punches. It honestly, brutally depicts some of the most frustrating disappointments of life. Perhaps the perfect example of this is seen when the Umas run a race with everything they had, not leaving any reserves in the bank, having pushed themselves as hard as they could during training, yet still losing to another girl who was just able to run a little faster. Even for our favorite Umas, no matter how well one trains, even if one has exhausted every possible effort, sometimes there is just someone ahead. Sometimes in life, we're just outpaced, and no matter how well we've prepared, we won't come out as the victor. But there is a light at the end of this depressing tunnel. As we've already talked about, Tokai Teo gave every ounce of discipline and heart she had to racing, training harder than anyone, yet no amount of preparation was able to keep her from suffering her injuries. She often found herself a sugar cookie, down in the sand, injured, sidelined, and somewhat humiliated. Yet the reason she became a legend was because she didn't avoid the sugar cookie and chose to keep moving forward anyways, constantly aiming for something greater, constantly putting her all in for the day she could be victorious. Uma Musume constantly reminds us that much like life, racing is unfair and that effort doesn't always equal results. Sometimes you're injured, sometimes you lose to a rival, and sometimes you just aren't enough. Even in the game, you can meticulously plan your training, but still face the collapse of bad conditions, late starts, and cruel twists of RNG. That is the sugar cookie. It's you having no choice but to face the shortcomings of life head on and keep moving, even if you were never the one at fault for the shortcomings in the first place. But in these moments, we have the choice to, as Tokai Teo showed us, get back up in the face of our losses and use them as stepping stones in the journey towards a future worth running for. So if you want to change the world, get over being a sugar cube and keep moving forward. Lesson 4. As Navy SEALs, one of our jobs is to conduct underwater attacks against enemy shipping. The ship attack mission is where a pair of SEAL divers is dropped off outside of an enemy harbor and then swims well over 2 miles underwater using nothing but a depth gauge and a compass to get to their target. During the entire swim, even well below the surface, there is some light that comes through. It is comforting to know that there is open water above you, but as you approach the ship, which is tied to a pier, the light begins to fade. The steel structure of the ship blocks the moonlight. It blocks the surrounding street lamps. It blocks all ambient light. To be successful in your mission, you have to swim under the ship and find the keel, the deepest part of the ship. But the keel is also the darkest part of the ship, where you cannot see your hand in front of your face, where the noise from the ship's machinery is deafening, and where it is easy to get disoriented and fail. Every SEAL knows that under the keel, at the darkest moment of the mission, is the time where you must be calm, compose, when all your tactical skills, your physical power, and your inner strength must be brought to bear. If you want to change the world, you must be your very best in the darkest moments. When I think about being your best in the darkest moments, I am reminded of how poorly I've handled setbacks and failures in the past, often choosing to succumb to them, only causing me to fall further. And it's this passage today that reminds me that what differentiates a normal person from a great person, or at least a sort of getting better person, is in the actions they take when they are facing life's toughest challenges. Over the past year, I've been entrenched in an area of life where I've seen countless people around me hit the wall of actually doing the hard stuff that they thought they wanted to do, but evidently didn't, as many of them quickly quit when facing the actual challenge that path entails. In that time, I saw a lot of people take that fall into the darkness. And even recognizing it and trying to aid them, they just couldn't stand to endure the difficulties and chose to quit. And I don't mean to rag on these individuals. Sometimes you just realize that a path isn't the one you're meant to be on, and that's plenty fair. But in that time, I deeply learned and started to recognize what it meant to actively choose to back away from the darkness, rather than confronting and overcoming it. When watching Uma Musume, I felt like I could almost see all of the characters facing similarly tough struggles, yet choosing to be the more courageous person necessary to come out the end stronger, and perhaps even victorious. For example, you've got Suzuka dealing with her broken leg at what could have been the pinnacle of her career, Teo facing her ever-shrinking goal line, having to deal with the loss of the legacy she so desperately wanted, McQueen dealing with her disease, Kitasan dealing with the loss of her prime, Diamond dealing with her family's curse, and even Agnes Taikon, who didn't think she could reach the pinnacle she dreamt of because her genius couldn't solve the weakness of her body. Every single Uma, and every human for that matter, has moments under the keel. Moments when the lights go out, where our effort doesn't feel like enough and we question what we are doing. But it's in those moments that stories truly shine, because greatness is defined by how one navigates that darkness. So if you want to change the world, you must run your very hardest during the darkest races. Lesson 5. It is on Wednesday of Hell Week that you paddle down to the mud flats and spend the next 15 hours trying to survive the freezing cold mud, the howling wind, and the incessant pressure to quit from the instructors. The instructors told us we could leave the mud if only 5 men would quit. Just 5 men and we could get out of the oppressive cold. Looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some students were about to give up. It was still over 8 hours till the sun came up. 8 more hours of bone-chilling cold. The chattering teeth and the shivering moans of the trainees were so loud, it was hard to hear anything. And then, one voice began to echo through the night. One voice raised in song. The song was terribly out of tune, but sung with great enthusiasm. One voice became 2, and 2 became 3, and before long, everyone in the class was singing. The instructors threatened us with more time in the mud if we kept up the singing, but the singing persisted, and somehow the mud seemed a little warmer, the wind a little tamer, and the dawn not so far away. If I have learned anything from my time traveling the world, it is the power of hope. If you want to change the world, start singing when you're up to your neck in mud. If there's anything I've learned from watching Uma Musume, it's that exact same lesson. The power of one person to change everything by giving others hope, even in their darkest moments. Special Week's optimism inspired Suzuka. Suzuka's return to the track inspired Teo. Teo's resilience gave strength to McQueen. McQueen's perseverance gave courage to Diamond. And all their strength is able to carry through the screen the potential for us to also receive, through their stories, hope. These girls show us that one person's fight against despair can ignite many, and that the simple act of inspiring or lifting up the downtrodden can move outward and touch countless people with the ever important but ever elusive sense of hope. Sometimes it's Oguri Cap showing how the quiet grind of daily discipline can prove that your heart outbeats preconceptions. Sometimes it's Kitasan and Satono showing that suffering shared enables us to cut through the roughest waves. Sometimes it's Teo who refuses to stay down no matter how many times the world tries to break her. But every time, it's one person changing the world by giving others hope. So, if you want to change the world, keep running when you're up to your knees in mud. Editing me here with a mid-edit addition. Now that I've gotten to this point in the video, I feel like I've noticed something that I need to touch on before we get to the conclusion. Up to this point, it has constantly amazed me that despite being a series that has memes like this, somewhere between the Goo Goo Babies and the McPickle Pounder is one of the most absurdly genuine shows you'll ever watch. It's a whiplash of a tonal cocktail. 1 ounce meme, 1 ounce depression, and 1 ounce vodka, all shaken together just so you can laugh, cry, and yell at a digital horse. That's also a real horse. Funny how that works. And yet, for all its anime absurdity, Uma Musume has managed to portray what I can no longer help but believe is one of the best stories I've ever experienced. Over my decade plus of seasonal anime watching, and the likely over 1,000 shows I've watched at this point, I've always struggled with the concept of what qualifies as a 10 out of 10. Before making this video, I had only ever given 6 of those 1,000 different anime a score of 10. These shows being Spice and Wolf, Bakemonogatari, Hyoka, Violet Evergarden, Your Name, and the most recent addition, Free-Run. But now I feel as though I'm forced to rethink that decision. I think I now might understand what a true 10 out of 10 actually is. The other day I watched this YouTube video about a guitar pick, or more so the experience this guy had with the small company that makes them. In the video he talks about customer satisfaction surveys, and how with a scale of 1 to 5, only scores of 5 for exceeded expectations build brand loyalty, with scores of 3 or even 4 still not being enough to dissuade someone from shopping around for a better deal. Only a score of 5 was good enough. The customer's experience had to exceed expectations for them to actually form a bond with the brand itself. But how does this relate to anime? Well, I think that our way of rating anime is massively flawed. The idea of a 10 being a masterpiece is confusing to say the least. After all, what constitutes a masterpiece? I've watched plenty of anime that are extremely popular and clearly very skillfully made, and in their own right deserve a 10, but haven't really connected with them myself. Inversely, there are shows that I love to death, yet could never really be convinced to rate that highly. Our personal experiences cloud our judgment of objectively quantifying the quality of the content we consume. And I think that's important to note. Everyone is different, and thus everyone is going to interact with a show differently, void of the objective quality that is presented. This scale of 1 to 5, however, may be the solution to this conundrum, because instead of chasing the impossible goal of objective perfection with a score of 10, it reframes the question as something far more personal and honest. Did this anime impress me? Did it blow me away? Did it exceed my expectations? And perhaps most importantly, has it gotten me to fall in love with it? Personally, I've found that when I go into a hyped big budget show, I'm already bracing myself for something incredible. My expectations are high, and even if the show rises to meet them, it's not quite as impactful as it could have been had I not known what was coming and ended up being blown away. There's something distinctly important about not knowing what you're going to experience that can make those experiences far greater. And ultimately, a show like Uma Musume with a borderline joke of a premise caused me to originally go in with middling expectations. But now that I've been sitting here editing this video for days, I came to realize something that I had no way of knowing when I was writing the script. Besides seeing so many more cool connections / topics that, had I included, would have made this video hours long, I noticed that even while scrubbing through the anime to find the clips I've used, Uma Musume is still moving me in a way that no other anime really has. While I've personally never cried due to any form of media, I have had times where I've come close. Many of those 10s I mentioned before being the culprits. But never have I found myself so moved that something as simple as seeing a 6-second clip of an anime has given me that rising, welling up feeling deep inside my chest.
Genuinely, making this video has been somewhat difficult, as I've found myself constantly being tugged through the expectation redefining highs and lows that Uma Musume has managed to drag me through. This series has blown me away like I never knew possible. It may be my new favorite anime, and it reminded me that sometimes the least obvious stories are most worth our time. Furthermore, it was a perfect case of not knowing what to expect, then blowing my puny little mind. So does Uma Musume deserve an objective 10 out of 10? I don't know, man. But what I do know is that it has certainly earned a 5 out of 5 for vastly exceeding my expectations, forcing me to fall in love with it, and even providing an absurdly deep and meaningful experience that caused me to make an hour-long YouTube video about it. So I'll finish this part off by saying, take what inspires you, no matter how absurd, even if it's horse girls, and run with it, because meaning can be painfully hard to find, and the world needs more people choosing to run.
There's a saying in Uma Musume and horse racing in general that goes, "Eclipse first, the rest nowhere." It comes from a British racehorse named Eclipse, who ran so fast that when he crossed the finish line, the rest were nowhere to be seen. Traditionally, it's a phrase used in reference to overwhelming victory, but I believe there's a better way to see it. In a world that sometimes feels more divided day by day, where hate spreads more easily than love and personal despair outweighs the courage needed to move forward, eclipse first doesn't have to mean outpacing others. It can mean choosing to eclipse that despair with hope, weakness with resilience, division with understanding, and fear with courage. And when you do, the rest nowhere no longer has to be about rivals falling behind. It can be about ensuring that the hate, despair, and fear are given no ground to stand on, that they are left with nowhere to endure. It can mean that if you want to see a better world, there is no other option than to be the one who eclipses. And together, eclipse first, the rest nowhere becomes a motto that evokes the challenge to be the one who runs boldly towards the heights, to be the best you can be, and make an effort to guide others to do the same. 2. With aid from McRaven's lessons, embody Roosevelt's man in the arena. Because just as an eclipse shields the world from the brightest light, so too can we block out the despair of life, making way for a more shaded and more hopeful tomorrow. And we can use that strength to stand in the arena for others, guiding them through the same downfalls that once threatened to consume us, showing that we are capable of overcoming the hardships of life. In doing so, we will find something greater, a world where a new light can finally shine, a world that has hope when despair feels endless, direction when aimlessness makes us feel lost, perseverance when failure feels final, joy in the midst of suffering, unity in the face of division, and courage where fear would otherwise stop us. A world where dreams are fine to be dreamt, where rivals are just as much companions, and where scars mark the start instead of the end of a story. Because that is the hidden depth of Uma Musume, that even something as strange and absurd as a horse girl anime can carry universal truths powerful enough to change the lives of countless people. Proof that meaning can be found in the most unexpected places. If these horse girls can show us anything, it's that when you choose to keep running, you'll eventually find yourself with enough stamina to keep up with the trials of life. And if that lesson can be carried from an anime about horse girls, of all things, into the real world, then maybe it isn't so absurd after all. Racing is not fair. You will fail. You will fail often. But if you risk heartbreak by chasing a dream anyways, if you rise again when injuries and failures attempt to push you down, if you lift up your rivals as much as you challenge them, if you give hope to those who've lost it and never, ever give up the run, then the generation after you and the generations that follow will inherit a track far grander than the one you stand on today. And what we've learned from Uma Musume will indeed have changed the world for the better.